Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Economic Development Committee meeting being held remotely, with most people being from their homes, I believe. So we'll get straight on with it. Apologies for absence.
No, Chairman, all 12 members are present.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest by members and officers as to the party whip? That's a no.
Sorry, Keith, I don't know. I didn't. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I think if, please, I'd feel uncomfortable if I didn't declare a personal interest in item number 9, the dualling of the A46 bypass. Although neither option makes it clear how the road could be widened between the Cattle Market Island and the Brownhills Island, the report does speak of land take, and we own land that may or may not facilitate the widening of it. So I think I'd be comfortable if I could register that at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. And have we got any advice for Councillor Rainbow in terms of can she take part in the debate? Do we know?
My understanding is I could.
Right, brilliant. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Penny. Okay, anybody else got any declarations to declare? No. Anybody declaration of intent to record the meeting? Obviously, this meeting's being recorded now anyway, and we're live streamed. Right, item 4 then. Minutes of the meeting held on 18th of November 2020. Are we happy that it's a true reflection? Please stick your hand up if you disagree, so I can see your hands. The ones on the screen rather than you. You want to speak, Matthew?
No. Move it, Chairman.
Can you take yourself on mute then, please? Thank you. So we were happy with it's a true reflection. Marvellous. Right, Chairman's report then. You have to bear with me because I'm reading it off my iPad. Okay, members will recall that the November meeting was one of our most important in recent times. It set out agendas with the adoption of the economic growth and tourism strategies, and how we will work with a range of partners. COVID continues to impact now. We are on lockdown 3. Council is still making sure we offer much needed support. Yet again, we are at the forefront of issuing grant support and doing so with absolute minimum of bureaucracy we can. We do not wait for money to land from central government. We pay as quickly as possible. We are working on additional discretionary grant scheme to capture industries which have fallen through the safety net so far, especially those which do not operate from a premises, e.g. taxi drivers. I also heard today that actually we might be looking at hairdressers that might just rent a chair in a salon as well. So I think that's a good thing. Lockdown does not mean we stop on mobilising for the future. As you can see from this agenda, we continue at a pace on a range of programmes, support and projects. On this agenda, we have a report on the raft of economic recovery measures we have in place and planned, a report on consultation on the A46 dualling, a piece of nationally important infrastructure, a likely £400 million investment, supported by a range of partners from Immingham Ports down to Tewkesbury. Updates on us actually delivering and taking brave but necessary decisions to intervene in the market, the Butter Market and Stodman Street, in addition to the former Robin Hood, where progress now is visible and looks amazing. Towns Fund project updates and imminent impacts starts on the 750k expansion of the Newark Construction College and the YMCA Community and Activity Village, that's easy for you to say, an investment of over £16 million. Places to Ride scheme in Edwinstowe, demonstrating our ability to work with partners like Harworth Estates, British Cycling and local communities to form proposals and find ways to secure funding to make them happen. All in all, I want to thank members, officers and partners for continuing to drive forward with a positive agenda for the future, despite the very clear challenges being faced. So thank you to everybody involved. Item 6, forward plan. Anybody got anything on the forward plan? Anybody want to mention anything on that? I think that is no then, thank you. Item 7, update report on economic recovery programme. Neil Cuttle.
Hi, thank you everyone. I'm freezing up quite a lot, so I apologise if I do. So if I just give you a bit of an update on the report that you've got, it's broken down into 3 component parts. There's the town centre reopening campaign and the work that we've done on that, and that's where I'll start. Just to say that we received £108,000 in June 2020, and we've explored and undertaken a number of projects and initiatives to assist with the high streets being reopened and for people and businesses to effectively trade and grow and move forward. I will apologise and say that this report was written just before Christmas and just before the next national lockdown, so there may be some issues that you want to pick me up on with regard to that. So what have we done? Well, we back in June, July, we reopened the high streets in mid-June and early July. We got business information and guidance officers out there to work with businesses to understand what they had to do to be compliant. We ran a number of communications campaigns. We put a lot of equipment and material out for road closures in some of the towns, particularly Southall. We did a series of open campaigns for Newark, Southwell, Edmonstone and Ollerton, which included radio, news articles, posters, flags and banners. More recently, we've actually undertaken a shop assurance standard to allow people to understand that when they enter a shop premises, they're safe, and to have a particular standard for retailers to actually aspire to achieve. And we've also started looking at developing footfall counters for the first time in the town. So we're using some of the money we received to match against the Heritage Action Zone grant we've received so that we can monitor footfall figures throughout Newark itself. We've also gone one step further, not utilising the 108,000. We found a little bit of extra budget, and we've implemented a High Street Diversification Fund, which, as some of you may remember, was a suggestion from the economic recovery strategy that Hatch Regeneris did with us in summer and autumn last year. This grant was an additional grant that provided retailers an opportunity, independent retailers an opportunity, to move their ability to trade online. We've done 2 rounds of that, and at present we've supported about 140 businesses, independent retailers, to operate in a new way. So just moving on to the second scheme around skills, you may remember in autumn last year a Kickstart programme was announced nationally to allow 6-month job placements. We're not a gateway organisation ourselves, which is the organisation that takes responsibility for the placements, but we have been working with Lincoln College Group to tie in both qualifications with work experience to offer 51 placements across the district. You'll see in paragraph 2.3 there a number of the different roles that people have have an opportunity to get a placement in, and they're quite diverse. Everything from a warehouse and logistics assistant to a groom and trainee mechanics. So there's been quite an offer put out, and that's being undertaken at the moment. The third programme was business support programmes and events. So we have a great team in Newark and Shelby District Council who offer a number of business support programmes with the Enterprise Agency, Nottingham Business Venture, and the Chamber of Trade and Commerce, and other membership groups to offer courses on things like supporting business through the pandemic, creativity, and solutions in cybersecurity. So we have a programme of activity for businesses to work to. Now, the final thing I'll say on this report is you'll see in paragraph 2.5 there a proposal to develop a business resilience programme. This is a programme that we want to do to help certain key sectors that you've agreed within the economic growth strategy to adapt, reorient and grow. So that's a programme that we're hoping to take to policy and finance that will allow those businesses to build resilience and grow during and after the pandemic. Chair, I think I will stop there, and hopefully I haven't cut out too much. The recommendations are for you to note the content of the report and to support the proposal for a business resilience programme to go to Policy and Finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Does anybody have any questions? Matthew Skinner. Oh no. Right. Okay. Matthew Skinner.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm absolutely delighted to receive this report. I'd like to particularly recognise that the efforts that Neil's outlined there, that we've identified and supported 140 independent traders across the district. What that's ensured for me is that we've helped to secure their future to thrive and flourish in our district and provide, where appropriate, additional employment for employees, etc. I was keen to understand, have we identified how many organisations would qualify for that remit? And out of the 140, what proportion does that make up? Thank you, Chairman.
You want to take that now, Neil?
Thank you, Chair. Before you say you're on mute and I start talking and win the first point. So yes, thank you, Councillor Skinner. The High Street Diversification Fund was very specifically for independent retailers, so we didn't necessarily want to go for multiples. The 140 are across everything, across the entire patch of the district and across all services within retail, from butchers and bakers to candlestick makers, as it were. So when we've done a bit of a monitoring evaluation programme on it, I'll happily come back to this meeting and share exactly who has received a grant and what impact that's had on them in the future. I hope that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have Peter Harris next, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the report. I'd like to pass on the thanks of some independent traders in Southwell. I hope that they've actually contacted you in Castle House about their thanks for the prompt way in which the District Council responded. They have been very positive, so thank you. 2 points I'd like to ask about. Firstly, a number of the town councils have made strenuous efforts, I think, including some small amounts of cash that they've spent in order to support the work of the District Council. I rather hope that that they get some support rather than it all going to the District Council, because their finances are much more precarious, frankly. And I think each of the three town councils, I think some parishes as well, have done some work in order to support the sustainability of their high street. So I hope that we can support them financially a little bit to defray some of their costs. Also, what are the plans for when eventually the tier 4, tier 5 issues resolved? Because I think there is some concern in the trading community in Southwell that although that they have tried very hard to retain their local customers, they are concerned with this additional change in circumstances that they may not, customers may go elsewhere because they're much more used now to going to other retailers. So what are the plans for the eventual ending of the current tier 5?
Am I okay to come in and answer that, Chair?
Yeah, come straight in after each one. I think it'd be easier, Neil, to be fair.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you, Councillor Harris. Yes, we have been working with some of the town councils, but in fairness to them, they have done a fantastic job with what resources they have had. We could perhaps do some more, as it were. So yes, thank you for that comment. Regarding plans for post-tier 5, at the moment, we're pretty much focusing what we can be doing in the way of business grants and support in the immediacy of the situation. But we do still have some of the initiatives and programmes, and we have a little money left to support further programmes when we come out of this. And I'm going to be slightly cheeky and say when we come out of this, because it's difficult to know whether it's going to be February, March, or it's going to be a more phased approach over the next 6 months or so. So I think it's a monitoring and keeping a watchful eye on the situation and reflecting what happens and changing as we need to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Neil Mitchell, please.
Thank you. It's great to see all the fantastic work that's gone on to support our local businesses. I echo many of the congratulations that have already been said. Two questions. So 1 and 2.4, when you talk about the business support programs and the events, obviously you've kind of mentioned this with the effect of a new lockdown and stuff. When we've run one of these events in the past in Edwinstowe, the real challenge was actually getting in touch with the local businesses with enough time in advance for them to be aware of it and plan to attend. Can only imagine those difficulties are going to be even higher with COVID. Do you have any thoughts about how we're going to connect with all the local businesses during the restrictions? And the second question is around the business resilience program. As an idea, I think it's very sound, and we are supportive of it, no doubt. Just realizing that they're saying that they'll view to contract start in February and March, which is not very long, but the detail here is quite thin on what actually this resilience program will do and how we will measure it as being successful. £300,000 is not an insignificant amount of money. It'd be nice to see a little bit more detail about exactly what this program consists of and how we'll know it has been successful. Thank you.
Thanks. Neil?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So the 2 points, yes, it is difficult to get hold of some businesses. We do have 1 or 2 of the members of our small team who are actually, probably fairly well known and have some fairly in-depth databases that can support and get out to some of those businesses. But you are correct, those databases are ever changing, and trying to get some more people involved in that is what we're always trying to do. And if I just do a sort of mention out to our economic growth officers, Sue Natris and Veronica Dennant, they are very well in with a number of the businesses, but we could also do more. I have asked that a database of businesses more particularly focused on Edwinstowe and Ollerton is grown, because that's perhaps where we're weakest, Councillor Mitchell. So I hope that answers question 1, at least in some part. Question 2, yes, I think that's a fair cop, if you will. The £300,000, I perhaps didn't give you as much detail as I should have done in this report, to which I apologise. But the idea is effectively to get between 100 and 120 businesses supported across the 4 industry sectors identified into the economic growth in the economic growth strategy. That support is ideally going to be focused by private sector consultancy firms or individual traders, such as the Chamber of Trade and Commerce, who may wish to take and bid for providing that training or providing that skills awareness. We're allowing the opportunity for some of that proportion to be direct grants as well. So if it was a bit of a sort of brokerage scheme whereby the contract split into 4, so £75,000 each, and I'm now making this up, I'll add, Councillor Mitchell, but let's say one supplier had on costs of £10,000 and they said we therefore have £65,000 in the construction manufacturing sector to support 30 businesses. We are doing this by design through procurement. So we have an idea of the direction of travel and the vision we want to get to, but we want the likes of the Chamber of Trade and Commerce, the FSB, and those kind of institutions to help us, guide us, what is going to be the most impactful way to deliver that scheme. I hope that gives a bit of an understanding. I apologise for being a bit detailed, but that is probably my fault in not giving you enough in the report itself.
Can you just confirm, Neil, there's been an email gone out to members in terms of a workshop. That's in relation to this, is it?
No, Councillor Girling, it isn't. What that is back to my days when I was in charge of adult education in Cambridgeshire. What I'd like to do is give all of you who are interested a bit of an understanding and a better opportunities of what the skills programmes are operating across Nottinghamshire, and more specifically Newark and Sherwood. I myself have been doing it for 3 years before joining you last June. And when you mix up apprenticeships, mentoring, training opportunities, it's a complex minefield. And I just, for those of you who are interested, I want to give you a bit of an understanding as to what it looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Rainbow, Penny.
Thank you, Chairman. And yes, sorry, the sound of, at the risk of being a little bit repetitive, I would just like to add my thanks to the team and congratulate you on the work you've done. I think you've been very proactive, and I think the shop local little leaflet we put in the Bramley, just served as a reminder to residents to shop locally. And indeed, one of the traders I spoke to said he had a really very good Christmas, and that people, I think, have realised that they need to support local businesses. But just one question, Neil. These 7 apprentices that we are setting on, have they been able to start yet, or are we sort of restricted with the current conditions?
So thank you, Councillor Rainbow. In answer to that question, after discussing with our HR colleagues earlier this week, it's advised that given that their placements are so short for 6-month periods, and given that we're pretty much locked down for at least 2 months now, it's better to delay it until March, April time for our 7 to give them the support they truly need. I don't think it would be fair to bring them in and do it remotely and be effectively telling them for a third to a half of your time you're working completely remotely without getting that support. It's disappointing, but it's one of those situations where we can't do anything else other than do that. If I can just interject and say I really appreciate all of your thanks, all of you, but really there's some other colleagues on this who really have helped as much, and I think it's worthy to just note that the likes of Nick Wilson and whatnot in finance have been absolute superstars in helping us deliver a number of these programmes.
Okay, thanks for that. Neil, you've come back up. Do you want, or is that a legacy at hand?
Yeah, it's just a quick follow-up question, and actually this is as much for you, Keith, about the business resilience thing and going out to contract. I understand absolutely the urgency of getting this in place for businesses because they're suffering with it right now, and I wouldn't want this to be held up in any way by the committee cycle. So as you go through this tender process, are you able to send that information out to the members of this committee so we have a sort of a view on what's happening and the kinds of services that will be delivered if the contracts are awarded before the next committee meeting?
In answer, yes. Councillor Mitchell, I think we have to just be cognizant and aware of how long some of this will take to procure and design. We are on mid-January now. We are in mid-January now, so assuming we get a spec out and it takes 6 to 8 weeks, it might not be operational until mid-March at the earliest. So I just want to, be realistic about timetables. I do think, though, that updating members here in a formal sense in the committee is one aspect, and I'm happy to do that. But if you would like to know earlier, I think we can probably do something where I send an email out or give you an update through a separate meeting. I'm easygoing about how we want to do that.
I just want to make sure that we're not in the way of getting this out as fast as possible.
Well, I think
given the emissions.
I think this is down to the Policy and Finance Committee anyway to. That what we're doing is passing it on to them, Neil, for them to say yeah, and then they'll get on with it effectively. But yeah, I think it'd be good for us to have updates so that we can just know what's happening, so that if businesses start asking us what's going on, we'd be able to tell them. And I think if we can get that information out to all councillors, Neil, rather than just this committee, I think that would be beneficial as well.
Yeah, by all means.
I meant Neil, the other Neil, sorry.
Yeah,
this is really confusing.
Yeah, no, Neil Cuttle, that's what I'd like to happen. I think it's important that members in the council know what we're doing to help support businesses, because they'll all have businesses in their patches. I think that's really important. All right, the recommendations then are on page 23. Anybody against? That's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Next on then to item 8 and the aforementioned Nick Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first of 2 reports that I'll be presenting tonight, and this is the one that's going to be looking forward to next year's, and this is proposing the budget that they'll be wanting to utilise during the next financial year, so beginning April this year, going through to March 22. So officers from finance have been working with business managers throughout the summer and into the autumn and through winter of last year, looking to build next year's budget. And clearly, as things have changed with guidelines and various different restrictions changing, so has the budget. And this is a flavour of where we are at the moment. So if I can draw your attention to the table at the top of page 26 on the agenda, which gives an overview of the initial budget for the current year and the proposed budget for next year, and then the increase and decrease in the employees' running expenses and income for next year. And what that's showing is an increase in resource need of 533,000. So from a budget of 1,294,000 that we approved this time last year to a potential budget of 1,827,000. The remaining tables within the core report drill down a little bit further from there and show the major services within there that contribute to that increase in budget requirement, whether that be from decrease or increase in, like I said, employees' running expenses and income. One thing I would like to bring your attention to is the table at 2.9 regarding the reduction in income, and clearly there are a couple of service areas that have contributed to that reduction in income, which is heritage, culture and visitors and service car parks. Now, because of the way that we account for things, we account for gross income and gross expenditure, and therefore the first line there, heritage, culture and visitors, is showing a reduction in income of 460,000. Now that is offset by reductions in expenditure in relation to agency bookings and bar provisions and those types of things. So we need to look at it in context of net position, which I'll come on to in a minute. But the paragraph at 2.12 just below that sets out a little bit around the income support scheme, for which we are able to get into and tap into for the current year, but we've been advised through the local government finance settlement that income support scheme will continue on into the first quarter of the next financial year. And what they'll be looking at is, rather than the budgets that we're setting for next financial year and any shortfalls of income against that, they'll be baselining it on the current financial year's budgets, i.e. then if a authority decided to increase their, for the sake of argument, car parking income because they anticipated they wanted to they anticipated they were going to generate a lot more income than they actually were, then potentially if the government had baselined it on next year's budget, they would have generated more money because they'd have got more money from the compensation scheme. In a similar way, as we're looking to reduce our budgets, because they're not baselining it at next year's budget, we won't be detrimented because we're reducing our budgets. So moving on then into the appendices. The appendices from 29 and 30 show what the committee looks like overall at cost centre level, so in terms of who's spending it. So the objective is which teams are spending that money and how much have they got to spend, and there is an increase or decrease against each one, comparing it to the initial budget for this financial year. And then Appendix B on page 30 gives a flavour of the types of expenditure, so what the service area overall is spending its money on. And again, there's variances comparing it to the initial budget. Appendix C on page 31 gives an indication of some of the more detailed variances over £10,000, plus or minus £10,000, and just gives a bit more of a description around how those items have arisen. Again, by team that's incurring that expense. Appendix D then shows the planned fees and charges schedule that we intend to approve at council in March. It gives again the current charge for the current financial year and the proposed charge for the 21-22 year. That's probably all I want to say for this report, unless there's any questions.
Anybody got any questions? No. Oh, Roger Blaney first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Nick, for the report. I have to say, I think this must be the most challenging budget for you and Mohammed to have drawn up in your career to date. And this must be the most challenging committee because so much of our, we're the one that generates so much of the council's income. And of course, with things like car parks and the heritage and culture, this is hitting us really hard during these lockdowns. I think it's absolutely right that when we look at the fees and charges for 21-22, we are not talking of putting the car park charges up. I think it's equally right that we are putting the lorry parking charge up. Looking at the number of lorries on the road at present, shifting goods around the country, let's make them welcome here in Newark, and let's ensure that they use our lorry park. But let's ensure in doing so that we are charging a commercial rate for that. So I appreciate the budget, and I'm more than happy, Chairman, to formally move the recommendation in section 7 on page 28.
Thank you, Roger. And Matthew Skinner.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a very brief one for me. I'm reviewing the Appendix B on page 30. It's a slight pet hate of mine when I'm looking at a balance sheet, and there's several references to the word other. I just wondered if there was any reason for that or if they could be more detailed on future reports. Thank you.
If I can come in, Chair. Yeah, so these are effectively our hierarchy codes within the system. So yeah, there's no reason why I can't get a more detailed breakdown of that if you want that supplied to the committee at a later date. But yes, we can look to break that down in future. It's not a problem. Like I say, it's really just the hierarchy codes that we've got, and there'll be a number of different descriptions of things underneath all of these codes. They're just ways of grouping those different types of expenditure.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a significant amount of money. Thank you.
Peter Harris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In Appendix D, there are a number of charges there, some of which are remaining static. I'm uncertain how often some of these are actually levied, how frequently some of these room hires are taken, and is there a comparison in terms of getting a good market rate? Because if they're not being used at the rates that we're charging, why are we charging it? Why can't we reduce the charge and actually get some income? It's very difficult to know without, and I don't think there has been recently a summary of how often some of these charges are made. I know certainly some of them have not been used in the last 2 financial years, and yet we're still charging a significant amount of rent for that. Surely we ought to be more business minded and reduce the charges so we get some income from them rather than just set a high charge and get nothing.
Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's not a problem. I can speak to the various different departments and look at whether or not we can get some usage data, and we can bring that potentially back to a future committee and update on that, and then we can look at whether or not we need to reduce or increase those charges potentially.
Thank you, Nick. And I've got Maureen Dobson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like something just answered first, and then if you allow me, I would like to pass comment on it. I can't seem to find, and I might even not be in the right committee, but I think I am, that grant that we give out, the £200,000 each year for greener, safer, cleaner, or I've probably got it the wrong way around. Nick, where is it in the budget?
I think that
is that leisure and environment?
Leisure and environment, Maureen.
Is it leisure and environment?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, while I've got Nick, then, Chairman, just allow me. Could we not, because we are so short of pennies because of COVID and we're not getting the income in, then I think we really ought to seriously consider deferring that, not stopping it, because it was an excellent idea and it worked wonderfully last year. But I think probably it's something, those of you who sit on leisure and environment, I think you perhaps ought to consider for your budget to defer it, because I really do think we can't afford it at this moment in time. And I think the public and certainly the parishes would understand that. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thanks, Maureen. I think that's something to go to the probably Policy and Finance.
Well, whoever, but I would recommend that, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. Did you want to start? Sorry, Matt Lamb. No, gone. Okay. The recommendations then it's been recommended by, proposed by Roger Blaine, seconded by me. Page 28. Anybody against? No, that's good. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Can you put your hand down, Maureen, please?
Sorry.
Thank you. Right, item 9 then, the A46 Northern Bypass consultation. Matthew Norton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's obviously already been mentioned this evening. Highways England are consulting on proposals for the Newark Northern Bypass for dualling it. This report was written before Christmas. We've had some time to consider the proposals a bit more, but I think we can't underestimate the importance of these proposals to Newark there and also to the wider region, as Councillor Girling mentioned earlier. They are key for helping us to unlock growth. They're key for improving traffic flow, and they are key for the wider region in terms of trade. At the moment, we are engaged, and the details, of course, are in the appendix of the proposed consultation that's being undertaken. At the moment, we are looking at the proposals. We are, as the report says, talking to various stakeholders and considering the impact of the proposals. Just some general observations, really, that are probably important to consider. Highways England have been keen to stress that this is a non-statutory period of consultation, so therefore it's not the last chance to influence the process, and they're going to work on the options throughout this process and moving forward. And so, you know, this is really our chance to influence their first thoughts on the matter, or their considered first thoughts on the matter. Some other things, all of this work is predicated on the Southern Link Road being delivered as part to the modelling has been done based on the assumption that will occur. So I think it's very important that we emphasise to Highways England the importance of the Southern Link Road. And we also want Highways England to look at the potential for providing emergency access to Tolney Lane from this proposal and other flood works that could be brought through as part of it. And also, I think this scheme will obviously have a massive impact on the local environment, and we would need to consider that, and that would be considered through an EIA. So those are the general consultation things I think we need to consider. I'm quite happy to go through in detail our observations about the two options and also various issues relating to them. I think it's also worth saying that clearly, obviously, this will have an impact on individuals and businesses along the route, particularly, of course, Winthorpe, given the proposals that will add an extra bridge over the A1 in both options. And we need to think about that carefully. Officers are engaging with that, with Mrs. Dobbs, Councillor Mrs. Dobson and Councillor Mrs. Dales, but also with residents as well in the best way that we can in the current circumstances. But I'm keen to understand what members think about the scheme, really, so that can help inform our consultation response.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, the recommendations on page 64, proposed by me, seconded by Penny.
Yes, seconded, Chairman.
Thank you. Roger.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Having over the last 6 years met with 3 successive roads ministers with our local MP pressing for this to take place, I'm delighted with the report. The consultation couldn't have started soon enough for me. There are 2 options there. Both of these would deliver regional and national improvements on the missing link on the A46, as the report makes clear. However, so far as the local road network is concerned, I personally believe it's crucial that this council pushes for grade separation of the cattle market roundabout. It seems counterintuitive to actually have a surface level roundabout there, what they call a hamburger roundabout, which will stop traffic on the A46 when the whole purpose of spending this amount of money, upwards of £500 million, is to improve the flow of traffic on the A46. And I think that really must be something that we press for in our response. Matthew has made the point rightly that there are residents along this route who are going to be affected, whether it's Farndon and certainly Winthorpe. And therefore we must equally press Highways England to look at how the impact on our residents in those areas can be mitigated as a result of this work. One of the crucial things, though, that we're going to have to press for is to maintain the traffic flow on the A46 during the extended construction period, because that is going to have such a significant impact otherwise upon the economy of this area and the economy of the region. So, as Matthew has said, this is not a statutory consultation period, but it is an opportunity for us to put markers down about the cattle market, about the interests and need to mitigate the impact on some of our residents who are going to be most affected. And then we have another consultation period, and hopefully our voices will have been heard, and we'll find that Highways England have responded with additional detail which answers those questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. Matthew?
Yes, and I think it's worth saying that this is, the consultation's currently underway. We have meetings to discuss some of the technical details. For instance, we've been debating amongst, officers have been debating the benefits of the Winthorpe scheme and end of the scheme in terms of its impact, and if the road's closer to Winthorpe but isn't elevated, is that better? Does that provide more capacity? Does the option 1 capacity, does that feed too closely into the existing roundabout? And we need to understand that from a technical highways point of view. So we have meetings with Highways England planned. Similarly, at the Farndon end, traffic lights or no traffic lights, we believe that, if you think about the traffic on Farndon on the FOS either way of that roundabout, the old road, they are disadvantaged, I think, if there's no traffic lights there. And then obviously Councillor Blaney has alluded to the hamburger, non-hamburger solutions at the cattle market. And I think grade separation is certainly a necessity to deliver actually what Highways England said they would deliver, really. So those are just some of the issues we need to address, along with a lot of heritage issues as well, of course, because the problem with grade separation is that will elevate the road in a sensitive location, potentially. So we need to have more understanding of that.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Maureen. If you're speaking, you're on mute.
I too remember Roger as waiting for this for a long time. And while Sue Saddington goes on very regularly at County Hall about Kelham Bridge, I go on quite regularly about the east side of the county and traffic and all the problems. But I'd like to turn everybody, first of all, if I may, Chairman, to agenda page 67 and investing in roads, our options consultation. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very disappointed that Highways England chose to come out, albeit might not be the end of the consultation, but to start the consultation 3 weeks before Christmas and the New Year. I found that somewhat suspicious, forgive me, and I felt that it didn't give people along the route, in particular the people of Winthorpe, who are going to be very heavily involved, and have problems, the time to have a meeting and actually have a proper discussion and debate and talk it through with the Highways Agency in enough time. Now, I know the agency put it further back to the 2nd of February from the 15th of January, but even then, I don't think it's long enough. And I would ask you, Chairman, and this committee to actually, along with the officers, of course, to ask Highways England if we could have another month. Right, I'd like to turn you now to page 68. The need for the scheme, and it goes through support economic growth. Nobody disagrees with that. Everybody realises what we're trying to do, and it's good. Improved journey times. Well, I'm sorry, the journey times are not affecting in many ways the people who live and work in our area. It might affect the journey times for those people who live in Lincolnshire and are going to work when we get back to work to possibly Leicester or Nottingham, I don't know. Make journeys safer. Well, you know, okay, there has been a few accidents, but they're mainly on the A1. They're not on the A46 to that extent. It's the A1 and the slip roads. Help the cyclists and pedestrians, but I think the best one is improve the environment. How can they say that when they want to build a flyover right next to Winthorpe Village? Flyovers, I don't know how many of you are au fait with flyovers, but they make an awful lot of noise because they're high up. So, you know, and they're talking about you know, local, they're going to communicate with the local planning authority, Natural England, Historic England, and the Environment Agency. Well, I hope they can get on a bit better with Historic England than what we did with the not the cattle market, with the oh gosh, Maureen, come on, you know what I mean, Roger. No, not the castle, the pub, the Robin Hood. Sorry.
Oh, the Robin Hood. Okay.
I mean, it took forever to get that sorted out, but the location and the meeting of the A46 on the north of Newark presents a significant number of constraints. Well, don't we know it does? It goes across the river twice, the railway 3 times. You know, we had all this when we had the first 3 routes that we were offered in the first place. The brown route, the red route, and I can't remember what the other colour was, probably green. And we all wanted, or not all of us, but because some of us wanted a route full stop. But quite a lot of us, local, wanted a route that went from what is now known as Fernwood across to the other side of East Stoke. And it would have been so much better and we could have got it all sorted out. Unfortunately, it didn't happen because somebody in Highways Agency wanted to prove that they could do this very, very difficult design. Well, I think we're back to that, Chairman. And while nobody in Winthorpe wants to stop the traffic problems, they want to help the traffic problems. The people of Winthorpe, or the people that have contacted me in Winthorpe, and there's a fair few, they have come up with some good ideas, and I hope they will have their ideas listened to, because not everybody, with the greatest respect to all of you, I don't think one of us on this committee is a highways engineer, are we? Is anybody a highways engineer? You might be knowledgeable, you might read, but you're not probably a highways engineer any more than I am. But there are a couple of highways engineers who actually live in Winthorpe, and they know what they're talking about. And they've got an idea. We could have looked, you know, why have they looked at ruining and spoiling and knocking down people's homes and creating problems for the village when they could have actually gone underneath and come off on the slip road, and they could have actually gone across and taken a piece of Newark Showground. They could have done that quite easily, because the cost is not going to be any more than the cost that it's gone up to. I remember Matt Lamb telling me 3.5, 4 years ago, when it was going to be from Fernwood to Winthorpe Roundabout, or Brownlow's Roundabout, let's call it. I remember him telling me it was going to be 3.5 million, 350 million. It's now near enough 500 million. And it hasn't got the Fernwood bit at all. It's got from Farndon Roundabout. So while I hear what Matt Norton says, and I'm very pleased Matt Norton's onto it, about wanting an access for Tony Lane, wanting to do this, wanting to do the other, I would urge you all seriously to consider people. That's what we're elected for. We're elected to produce jobs, this committee is, but it's also elected to think about people. And I would urge you to do that. So if Matthew could have a meeting with me and Linda or anybody else that wants to join in a Teams meeting, I'd be grateful. But I haven't had one with Matthew yet. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Maureen. I think in terms of where you said it's better for the environment is the fact that if the traffic is moving, it's less pollution than if it's stood still.
No, that with the greatest.
I think that's the principle behind it. Anyway, right, Peter Harris, please.
With the greatest respect, Chairman, that's just one part of it.
Yes or no?
Thank you, Chairman. I would support Roger's plea that there should be grade separation at the cattle market junction. I think that I'm very surprised that we go for a cheap option. I think I said before that a lorry driver told me driving from Barcelona to Lincoln, the first roundabout he came to was the Farndon roundabout, and there were 3 more immediately after that. And he found it very strange that a 1,000-mile journey, the first 3 roundabouts were in Newark and Sherwood. The issue I'd like to address, though, frankly, and I'm not sure whether or not this has been raised, it's about the silo operations that that Highways England seem to operate within, and the likelihood now of any grade separation for the railway crossing north of Newark. The Network Rail have been talking about ending that grade separation as they did in Retford many years ago. However, it looks like either option 2 or option 1 would preclude any re-alteration of that grade separation, which significantly impacts upon the East Coast Main Line and actually does very interrupt the Lincoln-Nottingham line as well, because of the way in which the grade separation is the grade junction works. Has that been considered? Because it does look to me as if it will almost be impossible to redesign the railway so there's grade separation on that flat crossing on both either option 1 or option 2.
Thank you. Do you want to take that, Matthew Norton?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Councillor Harris is quite right about that. That's a point that we've made consistently about the flat crossing, and I think it's a point that Councillor Blaney has made consistently as well in his advocating of a scheme around Newark for the A46. I think we are concerned about this particularly, and we have arranged a meeting. Tim Dawson, our infrastructure practitioner, he's arranged a meeting with Network Rail to understand their issues with this and whether whether they're fully cognizant of what the situation is and whether they agree with it. I think either option obviously potentially eats up more space between the current viaduct and the 2 railway lines, and we've at the design stage, I believe there was discussions between Network Rail and Highways England, but it seems to me, from a kind of an observational point of view, looking down on looking up at what the national agencies are doing, that both schemes potentially could happen within 5 years of each other, and wouldn't it be fantastic if they could make them work together rather than separately? However, I hear Mrs. Dobson's cries there, and I understand how unrealistic that might be, but I think we need to make that point because that piece of infrastructure is just as nationally important for different reasons. So that will be something that we'll be definitely following up with the various agencies.
Thank you, Matthew. Matt Lamb now, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And it's just picking up a number of points, I guess, that with a scheme of this size and this significance, there will inevitably be a discussion around the global support for the project. And we've all lobbied for this. It's in our strategies, it's in the community plan, it's in the core strategy, it's in the Midlands Engine strategy. It's all recognised as importance. However, when you get to this stage, we're then into the detail of the consultation, and that will not be lost, whether it be looking at the Farndon community, the Winthrop community, Tony Lane, individual land interests, and the businesses along the corridor. What I can assure members of is that those meetings with stakeholders, and we use that language, you know, to cover a range of sins. I guess let's be frank about this. There will be further meetings, and indeed there is a meeting in the diary with Winthrop Parish Council. There will be further meetings with Network Rail. There is further meetings with Midlands Connect and the Midlands Engine, and we will continue to run through that process, not only for this non-statutory element, but indeed on an ongoing basis. And again, the reference was alluded to earlier, but this shouldn't be lost, that this scheme will ultimately need an environmental statement because it is EIA development, environmental impact assessment development, and the suite of, I'm going to refer to ologies, but the suite of technical data that will be required to support that will need to be looked at, whether that be environment, whether that be heritage, whether that be highways, or whether indeed that be people and socioeconomics. So there is a whole raft for a project of this size that we do need to be mindful of. Notwithstanding, we need to make sure we capture every issue as part of debates like this.
Thank you, Matt. Roger, did you want to come back, or is that?
No, it's not a legacy hand, but in specific response to Peter's comment, can I assure him that there have, I think, been 6 meetings thus far that we have hosted working with East Midlands councils, what we call the Newark Show and Tell. Matt Lamb and I attend that. John Robinson has attended 1 or 2 of them, as has David Lloyd. And there we have both Highways England and Network Rail, and we have ensured through those meetings that they are each aware of the other's plans and aware that there could be a need for grade separation over the next 15, 20 years, and therefore what is done now on the A46 must ensure that that remains a possibility rather than taken off the agenda because it's thwarted by the current plans. So that's very, very much in mind, although of course the likelihood of grade separation of the East Coast Main Line also brings challenges, irrespective that the distance from the current crossing and the current A46 isn't that great to raise one train height up from the ground, especially if you've got the long oil trains that we have. But it's something that is being talked through with both Highways England and Network Rail. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chairman. I just think also one of our responsibilities as district councillors is that we encourage all of our ward members to take part in this consultation. You know, this is their chance to have their voice heard. I've had a couple of people contact me saying they're not going to bother because they think it's a done deal. But if that's people's attitudes, then it is going to be a done deal. So we need to be encouraging people who contact us about this to participate in this consultation. That's what it's there for. Thank you.
Good point, Ronnie. Thank you for that. I think we've done quite a lot in terms of social media getting out there. Maybe that's something we need to just reflect on again, Matthew. See if we can keep pushing it. Matthew Norton, that is.
Yeah, certainly we'll have another discussion with comms in terms of what what we've been doing and what's been done, and whether we signpost certainly members, certainly to the public, that the consultation will be ending at the beginning of February.
Thank you. Oh, I've got another hand up here. Maureen.
Yes, Chairman, I would like to ask that Matthew's just said it ends at the beginning of February. Could we not ask as a local authority to extend it to the end of February? Please. It's no good you shaking your head, Matthew Skinner. It's nothing, in many ways, you don't live there. People do live there. And you really do need to make sure as many people, yes, Matt Norton will get it out on social media. Yes, but half the village won't be on social media. Yes, they've been leafleting. They've been very active in the village. But you really do need to just give people time to consider and understand what it means. Normally, we would have had a public meeting, wouldn't we, Chairman? There would have been, people would have been invited over to Castle House, and there would have been a full public meeting, or that it would have been held in Winthorpe, or it would have been held in Farndon. It would have been done like that, and people would have benefited from that. But because of COVID, we can't. So we've got to do it a different way. And like you said, can we put it out on social media? Yes. But please, can you please seriously consider asking them to give the residents along that corridor, whoever they are, until the end of February, not the 2nd of February. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Maureen. I think if it was the official consultation, I'd have some sympathy with what you're saying. But this is sort of the unofficial element, and then they're going to come back to us, aren't they? So I think there's going to be a second bite of the cherry. So and the trouble is we keep extending things. It extends the delay. So I'd be reluctant to sort of go along those lines, Maureen. I'm sorry. Right, okay, it's been proposed and seconded on page 64. Anybody against? Thank you, that's unanimous.
No, Chairman, I have to vote against, purely and simply because you're not prepared, or not you, but nobody's prepared to consider extending the consultation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. So it's 1 against then. Thank you very much. That takes us on then to item 10, the resident cycle and car parking standards and design guide supplementary planning document. Matthew Norton.
Easy for you to say, Chairman. Yes. Yeah, it is unfortunate that as a profession we do generate incredibly long titles for things, but it does exactly what it says on the tin in that sense. So as you know, last year we approved a draft SPD to go out for consultation on residential parking standards. That consultation was undertaken. The responses to that are set out in Appendix A of this report. And I think there were 3 kind of key issues that came out from it, really, that we've sought to address. So there was a definite comment for a small number of consultees that they didn't think it was appropriate to put these standards in an SPD, a supplementary document. We don't believe that the context of what we're doing and the way it's being proposed, it's inappropriate to put it in an SPD. And you'll see at the end of Appendix A that we've kind of set out in detail why I believe it meets the regulatory requirements. The second area really was a discussion, I suppose, about whether or not we'd got the detail right in terms of different areas and different parking standards in different areas based on car usage. So we have taken the trouble to look at that again, and there's been some relatively interesting proposals as to how to address that. And we have made some amendments to that. So if you turn to page 124 and 125 of the committee report of the agenda, you'll see that reflected in proposals to have 3 zones for Newark urban area, and then 2 zones for some of the bigger settlements that have got relatively better connections and also less car usage, and then the rest of the district, which does include Southwell and Edwinstowe. And if you look on page 20, 125, you'll see the proposed parking zones for Newark. We very much reflected that in the town centre, it's given the nature of it, you're unlikely to achieve you're unlikely to achieve quite large numbers of parking, and there is parking already available. So that's the inner zone there, the town centre zone, and then there's the inner zone, which is anybody that knows Newark will know that's kind of the more densely populated areas. Then one for the rest of the urban area, which you'll see over on page 126. So those are those proposals. We've also, as if you flick through the document, you'll see we've added some clarifications on particular aspects, and we've also provided more diagrams to help developers understand what we're proposing. Given the nature of some of the changes, particularly the parking zones, we felt it was important to reconsult on those matters, and therefore we have proposed to do another further consultation. And the recommendations on this report are set out on page 87 of the agenda, and that's at point 9 there. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I think this has been through the rounds as well, hasn't it, this report? So thank you for all the hard work you've done on that. As said, the recommendations are on page 87, so I propose the recommendations. Do we have a seconder, please?
Second it, Chairman.
Thank you, Penny. Peter Harris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 101, the report goes into the comments, and on one of them it says that with regards to the garages counting as a parking space, so long as it is sufficient size. Can you define sufficient size, given that cars have increased by 46% in terms of width over the last 30 years, and presumably houses will be built for slightly longer than that period? I don't think we can predict, but perhaps you could define what sufficient size means.
Matthew?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so we have put more information in there in the SPD about garage sizes. I understand what Councillor Harris is saying about garage sizes, and I will take you to the right bit of the report if you bear with me, where it talks about that. So we obviously have standards now for parking spaces, and that informs a garage space as well. I think this is one of those tricky issues where it's hard to be completely specific, but we do require some definition of that. If you just bear with me a moment, yeah.
May I come back whilst we're looking through the report, Chair, in that the current standards are insufficiently wide, even the new ones, for the vast majority of members' cars, and they wouldn't be able to get in the door. They wouldn't be able to go in the door, and they don't get into the car parking spaces on the surface car parks either, without a considerable difficulty. And for an instance, Lynn drives an equivalent to a Beetle. The Beetle used to get into the garage. Her car, which is the same equivalent specification, Volkswagen, doesn't get in, and I can't even get through the door.
Yeah, I think this was brought up on the working party, to be fair, Councillor Harris, and I think in the report it does say about the fact that also to have some storage space in there for a push bike. So they have increased the size of it, and I think Matthew Norton might have found that now. Matthew?
That's correct, Chairman. If you turn to page 25 and 26, sorry, agenda page 144 and 145, you'll see what it talks about in terms of it's actually, yes, it's key principle 2. It talks about the garage sizes, and those are kind of based on what the highways authorities say. Given the nature of this document, we're not really going to go any further than they say at the moment, unless we've got any other evidence, and we don't have. It also talks about parking spaces as well, and it talks about a size, internal dimensions of at least 3.3 metres by 6 metres per single garage space, including the internal garages, with a minimum door width of 2.4 by 6 or 6 times 6 per double garage space, with a minimum door width of 4.2. Or, and this is the important thing, I think, in terms of how things go in the future, the up-to-date guidance from the Highways Authority. Clearly, this is a document for now. In the long run, the aim is to have a more all-encompassing design guide, which will include this information. But that's what we're proposing at the moment.
Thank you, Matthew. Are you okay with that, Peter?
I think he said yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Neil Mitchell now, please.
Just a few quick comments. So I'm not well versed in planning regulations, but to me, the zonal approach makes perfect sense. I think particularly in the report, it talks about the differences in car and cycle usage, currently and predicted across the district. So to me, that makes absolute perfect sense. The other thing that jumped out at me, I think is on page 169, the latest government estimates for emissions that identify that our district has the highest per capita emissions in Nottinghamshire. So I think the push to encourage developers to include electric vehicle charging points and storage spaces for cycling to try and push that as the future is absolutely the right direction. I realise there's difficulties in, viability conversations and things like that, but I think it's right for us to try and set that direction and encourage people. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on anything there, Matthew?
No, I think the emissions evidence there obviously just demonstrates probably the rural nature of the district, I think.
Okay, thank you. Maureen.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I say good report, Matt Norton. Well, Matthew Tubbs, part of Matt Norton's team. But can I also say, under little c on the recommendations, it's amazing, isn't it, that we have the decency and the courtesy to actually go back with a final consultation, but we can't do it with Highways England. Sorry, Chairman, but I had to get that one in. But, I do approve of you going back, Matt, and listening to what Peter's had to say as well, and Neil, because more and more people are going to be cycling. More and more people are going to be using electric cars. So I think the sooner we have less cars on roads, the better. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Maureen. Okay, they've been proposed and seconded. Anybody against? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you, Matthew. That takes us on then to item 11, places to ride application update. Richard Uthwaite.
Thank you, Chairman. Interesting that Councillor Dobson mentioned cycling at the end there, because this report is about our application to British Cycling's Places to Ride scheme. You may recall at the last meeting I said we'd had the positive news that our stage 1 application had been passed, and we'd been encouraged to progress to a more detailed stage 2 application. So we worked fairly quickly with our strategic and community partners, the likes of Harworth Group PLC and Active Knots and Edwinstowe Parish Council to undertake some community engagement, and that included residents as well as things like disability cycling groups within the Edwinstowe, Ollerton and Booton area. And we submitted the stage 2 application just before Christmas in order to get it to their January board meeting. So we should hear the outcome this month. And early indications are that it's been very favourably received and looked upon as a project they would very much like to support. British Cycling obviously have a lot of criteria that their schemes have to meet. The emphasis is very much on community and getting people cycling and confident in cycling. So it's different from the sort of facility people may be familiar with at Sherwood Pines, for example, with the technical trails and so on. This scheme is very much more about encouraging grassroots level, community groups, hard to reach groups to get into cycling, but also includes elements like a small pump track area and perimeter trails that would be of interest to perhaps more experienced cyclists who may then feel inclined to progress literally down the road to somewhere like Sherwood Pines to pursue their passion at I guess a slightly higher, more advanced level. So that's how we're very much differentiating this scheme in our bid for funding. And I think the recommendation is that should we hear this month that our application has been successful, we recommend to Policy and Finance that the scheme be added to our capital programme. Thank you,
Richard. So I propose the recommendations on 204. Do you want to second it, Neil? In most of it's in.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely happy to. Yeah. All right.
Two people speaking then. Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so proposed by me, seconded by Neil. I've got Peter Harris with his hand up, please.
Thank you, Chair. The comments of the responses are very interesting, particularly relating to links to the Thoresby hub. What progress is being made with regards to the Highways Authority to ensure that actually getting there and getting away from there is safe? Because at the moment it certainly isn't.
Okay, we've actually been talking to British Cycling today about the cycle links and extending some of those in the area. But I think if you're talking about actual roads, this is also, as some members may be aware, part of something we're looking at in the Forest Corner master plan, particularly that nasty crossroads in Edwinstowe village, and the options for potentially making both road and things like pedestrian and cycle travel much safer in the area. So it's something we are discussing with colleagues at Highways, but also very much looking at linking up those cycle routes, because there are a number of obviously different cycle routes in the area. The issue until now has been that they're not always as joined up as perhaps they could be.
Thank you. Matt Lamb, you put your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And it's just building upon that point, really, for Councillor Harris's benefit. There are two things, I guess, happening. So one is the Forest Corner work and the issues around that main road to that part of the portion of the site and how that links back to the village, but also the wider development, which you might recall is now known as Thoresby Vale, or rebranded as Thoresby Vale, the former colliery site. That will be the application for the phase 2 infrastructure is currently before the council to assess, and that very much is part of that wider linkage package, particularly highway, footway and cycleway. So that will all come in sequence as part of that proposal, and I expect that will go before the planning committee very shortly to be able to allow Harworth, the main developer, to implement that.
Thank you, Matt. Neil Mitchell next, please.
So just one clarification and one comment. So in 3.2, it talks about the contribution from Harworth, and it says it's been made clear that's not going to come from Thoresby Vale's Section 106 contributions unless agreed by this council. So the question is, who exactly has that been made clear to? And my understanding is that there's an Edwinstowe Section 106 working group, including the parish councils, that look for projects to fund through Section 106 money. Are they involved in that decision, or does that decision, should it come, lie solely with this council? And as a comment, it's something that I know that Councillor Peacock, as his role as local member, has spoken to some of the officers, but I think it's just worth mentioning here that while we had a great response to the consultation, there were very few responses from under 24s. I think he said there was only 2. So assuming that we are successful with this and we move on to the next stage, I think it's imperative that we reach out to the youth groups and the young people in the area, and not just in Edwinstowe, but in the surrounding areas, because it will attract people from, you know, a wider area, to make sure that they're involved. We capture their input, as well as things like I understand there's a local group trying to organise a pump track. So if we can coordinate and work with them, I think it would be a great opportunity.
Thanks, Neil. As you know, we do try to work with all groups to make sure that we get the right thing. We don't want to spend money to waste it. It needs to be the best we can possibly do with the money we have. I've got. Do you want to come back on that, Richard, first, and then I'll bring Matt Lamb in after you?
Yeah, well, largely on the second point, I think again it's probably partly the I guess the timing of this meant, you know, we were plunged into another COVID lockdown. It was difficult to do some of that community engagement, so we've relied very much on some of our community partners. But yeah, should we be successful in this bid, then I think we would be able to work, yeah, a lot more closely with some of the younger youth groups and people like the disability cycling people, to actually get a better feel for what they and their members would really want from the facilities. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So just a couple of points, just building up on that one from Richard. I've spoke to Councillor Peacock outside of this meeting, and I think that group, that youth voice, will absolutely be welcomed by ourselves, Harworth and British Cycling. I'd like to get the money first, but then I think we can then really drive forward in terms of making that happen. And on the first point, Councillor Mitchell, technically, the decision to allow 106 monies to be spent on this project would be the district councils. I'm hoping we never get there, because we've made clear that that money is for additional community benefits, not for this, which will be funded by British Cycling. If it were to happen, what traditionally happens is we negotiate with the host parish. So I would hope through that parish link that any other community organisations that have a view on that will still take part. But my starting position is that is not up for grabs, and that is a separate pot.
Thank you for clarifying that, Matt. I think that's really important. And also about the youth, engagement of the youth, especially once we've got the money, because we want to manage expectations. We don't want to sort of gym all up saying they're going to get something, and then if we're unsuccessful, they're going to be fighted. It's a great report, Richard, in terms of what you've done to get this far. And I wish you all the luck in coming back to us in a short period of time, saying you're successful and we can get on with it. So well done for that. I've got Penny next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a brief comment really to say I think it's a super project, quite an exciting scheme. I wish it was nearer my area. But also exciting to read that 800 houses are going to have direct access to this. And hopefully, you know, the younger generation, cycling will just become second nature to them, and they will automatically transfer it onto the roads and go about their business via bicycle, which is what we've been adhering to in earlier items. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Right. So it's been proposed and seconded. Recommendation on page 204. Anybody against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, now it's items for information. Item 12, the Economic Development Revenue and Capital Forecast Outturn Report to 31st of March 2021 as at 30th of November 2020. Nick Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and again, easy for you to say.
Yeah.
So this is my second report on night. So I've started earlier on by looking at the proposed budget for next financial year. What this report is doing is looking at the current financial year and forecasting forward to the end of March of where we're likely to be at that point in time. So the reason we brought this as at period 8, the end of November, is because of the timing that it takes to produce the report. So instead of a period Q3 position effectively, which would have been the end of December, clearly the timing of trying to put together the information and then produce a report meant that we had to do this as at the end of November. So again, clearly we've put the work in during December with business managers and the accountants from within the finance team, and those are in the context of all these changes in legislation and regulations around the various tier systems that we found ourselves in throughout December and into January. So if I can draw your attention to the table at 3.1 on page 292, what that's showing overall is for the council prior to any income from the income support scheme that I was talking about earlier, the government's income support scheme, is an unfavourable variance of 478,000 on overall services, of which the Economic Development Committee gives an unfavourable variance of around 632,000, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. So, as I said, that 478,000 unfavourable variance doesn't account for the impact of the income support scheme. So again, across the council, the various different services that receive sales fees and charges, we've suggested within the monitoring for them to look at exactly where they're going to be at outturn, and then we've accounted separately at the paragraph 3.4 that we believe will get in the region of somewhere between 400 and 500,000 back from that income support scheme, which would then leave an overall variance of somewhere between an unfavourable of 78,000 and a potential favourable variance of 22,000. So that's overall in terms of the council's finances. Now, what that doesn't include is any potential return funding from the Nottinghamshire the business rates pool, and Section 151 officers are monitoring that position at the moment. So if we go back to this committee and the Economic Development Committee, if we just move through the pages, the policy and finance of the policy and finance report, and we turn to agenda page 300. So that gives a more detailed breakdown of each per committee. And we've got there of the £632,000 variance broken down by where that's come from within the services that of this committee. If we then move over onto page, I think it's page 304 of the agenda, this looks at the capital programme, and again, what we're suggesting is that there'll be no variances in terms of some of the capital items, the capital schemes that we've got from within this committee, but it gives you an indication of what those currently approved schemes are for the current financial year. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview in terms of the report, and happy to take any questions where I can.
So thank you, Nick. I know this report's for noting, so we don't have to propose and second it. I just want to give you a sort of bit of praise, really. You're still looking like you're 45. You're doing really well, mate. It must be an absolute nightmare for you, all the changes that keep coming through. Anticipating getting money, maybe not getting it, hoping you're going to get something. And I just want to say thank you very much for all the hard work you and your team do. We really appreciate it because it's given us the best possible picture that we could have in these circumstances. So thank you for that. Has anybody got any questions? No? Right, so the recommendations are on page 209. Anybody against? Thank you. Thanks for that, Nick. That's brilliant. That takes us on then to item 13, the LDF update. Matthew Norton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this report just giving you the current progress report really on various elements, the evidence-based work. Housing needs assessment is going to the Homes and Communities Committee, I believe, and everybody will have a chance to have a look at that. The open space strategy is in its final stages, and we'll hopefully bring that to a future meeting of the committee. We're looking to sense check that with people as well to make sure that it's got the right information, because it's obviously a large piece of work. In terms of the allocations and development management, DPD, as it sets out 3.2 there, we're currently looking at potential sites for gypsy and traveller accommodation, and we hope to bring a report to the March meeting of committee. Recommendation on page 312 there to note.
Thank you, Matthew. And again, you know, to you and all the members of the LDF task group, actually done a lot of hard work and given you a lot of headache to try with a solution, but that's why we're there as councillors, to give you a headache. We can't make it easy for you. So I'd just like to thank you for all the hard work you've done and all the members of that committee as well. It's been a really interesting journey, to be fair. With lots of headaches, but we've come up with some solutions, so that's good. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, the recommendation is to note on page 312. Anybody against it? No, well, you can't be against noting it anyway, can you? Okay. Thank you, Matthew. That takes on to item 14, Autumn Staycation Visitor Campaign. Richard Uthwaite.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, at the time of our last meeting in November, this campaign was still running. So I said I'd bring the performance statistics to the next meeting, and I've presented them in this report. I guess there's just a couple of things to mention specifically. The campaign was slightly different in that the incredibly tricky timing of it was something we had to think very carefully about. Although it actually started between lockdowns, we did, as members will recall, go into tier 3 and then fairly quickly after that into tier 4. We aligned the campaign to Visit England's Escape the Everyday campaign. I think this is an example of where perhaps working at that national level can be of benefit, both in terms of reach of the campaign, but also in terms of ensuring that the message aligns to government advice at the time. So it wasn't so much a response driving campaign saying come to visit Newark and Sherwood now, but it did tread that fine line of actually promoting the destination brands as places of interest that people would want to find out a bit more about, hence the campaign tagline, Who Knew? In terms of performance, it did very well. The total number of website visitors in October and November was up by 44% against the same period in 2019. And actually in 2019, we did have the end of our festivals campaign running with things like in October, the Bramley Apple Festival, and there were a couple of other music festivals. So it wasn't that 2019 was a quiet year by any means. So we did well to increase that. And just over half of those visits in October and November were specifically to the Who Knew campaign page and the competition page. So it shows it was no coincidence. They were being driven very specifically by the campaign and the campaign dynamics. And with the competition, we'd found again in 2019 that those prize competitions drove a lot of engagement, and that clearly worked again this time. And the winner of the prize draw for a luxury weekend in Newark was from Rochester in Kent, which I think again shows that the reach of the campaign. Yes, we used local media. When I say local, I really mean regional, within the East Midlands, South Yorkshire, into parts of East Anglia. But actually, we also used some national channels. And yeah, having a winner from Rochester in Kent, I think, proves that it did capture people's imaginations up and down the country.
That's brilliant, isn't it? I think what encourages me the most, Richard, because I know obviously we couldn't encourage people to come now, but it to me it gives a feel of that people are looking where they want to go when they can. So as soon as the restrictions are lifted, they've already got in mind where they want to go and what they want to do, rather than, oh, the restrictions have gone, what are we going to do now? And that's really encouraging. So I think it's been a worthwhile campaign, really. Right, okay, I've got Neil Mitchell.
Just a quick question. It's interesting that we used a social influencer as part of this campaign. I'm going to ask Richard, do you think that was a cost-effective way of marketing? Did we? Was it successful? Is it something we're going to do again? Yes, definitely, Councillor Mitchell. It was very cost-effective.
I think off the top of my head, I'd have to check back. I think the Zena's suitcase activity cost us less than £1,000, and that included, entrance and mileage and refreshments and things that were all part of the 2 days that she did, because some of her posts were from cafes in the marketplace and things like that. It had a reach of 20,000 of her followers and lots of video views on Instagram Reels, which again is not a channel we use corporately, and it might not work terribly well for a local authority, but for something like a social influencer, things like Insta Reels obviously can be really effective. So yeah, it's we always try to be a bit innovative. We don't just do the same as we did before. We try and always build on that, and I think this is a good example of trying something different and at fairly low cost, and it proved itself. So yeah, we'll if the opportunity arises, we'll certainly do more of that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, it's for noting, page 315. Thank you very much. Thanks, Richard. That takes on then to item 15, Newark Towns Fund update. I think this is the smallest report we've got, isn't it?
It is. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a small report, a concise report, I like to think, but hopefully one with the biggest impact in due course. Just to fill members in on where we are. So I'm afraid I'm not coming to you with a Towns Fund announcement, but I am confident that we will be in the public domain, and by the next meeting there will have been decision and we'll be having further discussions. However, what I wanted to put across from this report is to actually outline for you that that doesn't mean that work stops, nor do our aspirations stop. You can read for yourself the report, and I won't detail all of the matters there, but just a couple to make you aware of. So the first one on the Newark Gateway site and the delivery of that site and the work around the demolition of the cattle market. We are working up now the tender spec for that, and that is likely to go out to the market in this second week of February. So that is on as part of that process. In terms of the International Air and Space Institute, I've referred previously to international partners that are part of that. And by the end of next week, I am hopeful that will be in the public domain and we can be clear on what is coming to Newark as part of that partnership with that organisation and with the work of the Lincoln College Group, Aviation 360 and the RAF. So hopefully exciting times to come from that point of view. Just a couple of other matters to make you aware of. And again, this is the speed at which these things happen, but hopefully positive. The Stockman Street redevelopment, which you will see is subject to a separate exempt item for discussion later. That is working towards a planning application being submitted at the end of March with a public consultation prior to that towards the end of this month. So again, that's something that we'll brief you on under separate cover as part of that accelerated towns funding and as part of our acquisition of that, one of three that we've already referred to in terms of the Butter Market and the Robin Hood previously. And finally, two more. Firstly, the expansion of the construction college. So you may recall this was an expansion to provide a greater range of traditional services and also stonemasonry. I'm delighted to report that the tenders have come back, that full planning permission is secured, and within the next 2 weeks there will be a formal announcement and publicity on that starting with, which is 1,000 new students coming through the doors over the next 5 years. And finally, again, on the YMCA, and I've alluded to that in the papers for you. So, and Keith referred to this in his chairman's report in opening. But again, we are very close to being able to confirm the first sod will be cut on the subsequent phase, which will deliver us all of the investment, the new building, the community spaces, the studio spaces and the largest climbing wall in the UK. So hopefully positive news that we're now turning that into delivery, and I hope to have more for the committee when we get to the March cycle.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I think it's brilliant, to be fair. It shows how busy we are as a council and getting on with it, you know, with a relatively small team. So well done for everybody that's involved in all that. I've got Peter Harris first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a query relating to the programme of training at the Training Institute. I have been astonished at the paucity of adult retraining schemes, particularly in 21st century additive manufacture and 3D modelling. And I'm not sure whether or not this is part of the programme for people who are in employment and looking to upgrade their skills, particularly in additive manufacturing, because there is nowhere locally where employers can send their staff for that new technology manufacturing. It's quite important, frankly, in the aerospace industry, but that's around Derby rather than Derby and Loughborough rather than here. And I just wondered whether or not the potential governors have considered how they're going to incorporate training in some of the new manufacturing techniques will be applied and delivered.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So Councillor Harris. So yeah, just to bring you up to speed, I guess there's two issues at play there. So the first one is the International Aerospace Institute itself, and you may recall that that was training for pilots, ground crew and engineering from a 16 post education level onwards. And then there is the logistics work that is ongoing, which is more around the digital skills, logistics and opportunities and the supply chain piece. And it's very much in that latter category that we expect that to generate some interest. I've got to be slightly careful in that when the partner is announced for the International Aerospace Institute, that will in itself generate some interest around the industry and around that supply chain teaching R&D piece. So I think that is something that we'll be bringing to you later in the year as a committee when that logistics work is back. But absolutely that is on the agenda, that this comes back to not just industry sets, but skill sets.
Okay. Thank you very much. To be noted then on page 321. Thank you for that, Matt. Now, the next one, item 16, it is the butter market, but be mindful that we do have it as an exempt item, item number 18. So if it's any questions relating to finances, can you please hold back for them? Okay, so Neil Cuttle, can you present the report, please?
Hi, yes, I think the majority of this conversation is perhaps going to be behind the different options that are outlined for the bringing back of use of the first floor. You will see that there's an exempt report that goes into the detail regarding numbers. If I just give a little bit of context first, we've got 100% occupancy of the units that are on the first floor at the moment, and we now are looking at what we can utilise and what the options are for the first floor itself. There are a number to go through, which include using it as community space to different proposals that fall under the exempt item. So I don't know if I can say anything more. I know Matt's got his hand up, and I think we're going to do a bit of a sort of double act on this. So if I can just stop there and maybe you can pick up with me in the exempt part, Chair.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to say something, Matt?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, and the purpose of this report is twofold. So firstly, it is reflective in terms of what we've done today, and I'm pleased to report that you will have seen and picked up from the report that we now have a number of we've retained existing tenants and have a number of new tenants, which is great news. And again, sadly, we're in another lockdown, but Specsavers just about opened before it had to close again as the most recent tenant as part of that process. In terms of the next phase, which is the upper floor in broad terms, notwithstanding the sublinks to ground floor, what we are after for you as a committee are understanding some of the parameters and preferences around the next phases. And I think that is something that will be picked up in an exempt discussion with your commission chair, unless you are happy to take the re-exempt report as read. But I suspect we might want to debate on that can happen under the exempt item of business.
Yeah, I think because there's cost implications behind it, I think we need to go to the exempt on that, really. I think it's good that we've got this particular part of the report as a public report. because it's shown the public yet again that we're not sitting back, we're not letting COVID disrupt us too much, we're still getting on with things, and well done for everybody involved in making sure that all our units on the ground floor are now occupied. That's been a great piece of work, and it's given us a real good platform for making sure that the old building itself will be viable going forward. So well done to everybody involved in that. Does anybody want to ask anything on this, or do you want to wait for the exempt item? No hands up, so we'll go to the exempt then, I think. Okay, exclusion of the press and public. To consider resolving that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of the business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. So we'll just wait now to be confirmed that we're now not live streaming, and then we'll get on with the last three items.